It just drives you crazy. In fact, we've had pre-foreclosure leads that were basically at the closing table. These sellers just backed out and decided that they'd rather get foreclosed on by the lender. I've tried to figure out the psychology and I have just given up. All right, welcome back to the Sub2 Investor Show. My name is Hans, and this is 3 reasons why pre-foreclosures are my least favorite lead source for subject to deals. Now, this is episode 1 of deal 2 in my Real Subject to Deal Breakdown series. This is where I am walking through actual life subject to deals that I've closed and showing you from beginning to end how these transactions were executed. I may not be a guru, but I've done more than 24 subject to deals in under 2 years from the time I did my first subject to deal, and have established enough passive income with over 30 cash flowing properties to quit my 9-to-5 and be an investor full-time, so maybe there's some value that you can glean from these videos. Now, this deal came from, obviously, a pre-foreclosure list. This is quite different from the first subject to deal that we did, which came from an expired listing. These 2 deals are totally different. That deal was a very clean-cut transaction. This one was a little bit messier and had a lot of twists and turns. Now, if you stick around to the end of this video, you're not only going to hear the 3 reasons why pre-foreclosures are my least favorite lead source, you're going to hear one enormous reason why they can be the most profitable lead source for subject to deals. All right, so before I go any further, let me just show you the closing statement so that you can know this was a real subject to deal that we did. Remember, our first subject to deal was, I think, did we close in July of 2021? And so our second one came quite a ways after that in November. The total price for the house ended up being $111,000. These are all of our title fees here on the closing statement, subject to mortgage balance. And that was $75,000. Then the arrears and lawyer fees that we had to pay to catch up and reinstate the mortgage were roughly $30,000. 75 plus the 30 totals 105, but then we paid the seller $6,000. Okay, so there you go. You can clearly see that this was a real subject to deal that we closed. So let's get into it. Number 1, everybody is targeting pre-foreclosures. I'm talking about all the real estate agents who are looking for leads, and folks who are being foreclosed on are natural candidates for people who might want to sell their house. So they are getting hammered by the phone, by text message, by letter, by postcard, by door knocking. They're also being targeted by, you guess who, cash investors who want to come in, get the house at a deep discount, and then flip the house to make a profit. They are also being targeted by attorneys, namely bankruptcy attorneys, to see if they would want to file Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So pre-foreclosures are perhaps the most targeted list out there. So it's very competitive. That's an example of this. So let's get into this deal a little bit. So we marketed for this deal via text message. We have a very aggressive text message campaign that's automated. So we pull the list from a local website that lists all of the trustee sales, the pre-foreclosure sales, as soon as they come out, so we can get that list fresh. You got to get that list fresh if you are in a non-disclosure state. There's disclosure states and non-disclosure states. Basically, if you're in a judicial state, that means lenders must foreclose through the court system. But if you live in a non-judicial state, lenders don't have to foreclose through the court, so they can foreclose sooner. Since we are in a non-judicial state and foreclosures can happen rapidly within 30 days, we have a very aggressive text message campaign that automatically sends to these folks. This is how we got this deal. Please like and subscribe. Do me a huge favor and boop that like button. The seller responded to our text message, and immediately, once they responded, I hopped in my car and I drove over to that house. I knocked on the door and I had an appointment with the seller. I got lucky. I was able to, actually, I think I was the first and only investor in the door. What's crazy about this, as I'm sitting on the couch in the seller's living room, he's getting multiple text messages from other investors who are wanting to buy his house. In fact, I got one-upped in my marketing branding. There was a investor who called themselves Angel, and they branded themselves as Your House Angel, who has shown up to magically get you out of this terrible situation. I thought there was no way I could compete with an angel literally appearing before my seller in the living room. Anyways, I've had sellers, pre-foreclosure sellers, give me a stack of postcards and letters from the other investors and the agents who are all trying to do something with this lead. It's a very competitive lead source. So you got to pull the list from a local source, not from Zillow or even from the MLS, as those get syndicated several days after they appear from the county. You got to market to these folks right away on the same day that the list comes out, and you got to be the first person over to their house to have an appointment with them. Number two, some of these pre-foreclosure sellers are the flakiest individuals you'll ever come across. They'll be text messaging you back and forth, having a great conversation, trying to come to a solution, and then they'll go dark on you for days. But then they'll randomly text you at 2 a.m. texting about the house, and it just drives you crazy. In fact, we've had pre-foreclosure leads that were basically at the closing table. These sellers just backed out and decided that they'd rather get foreclosed on by the lender. I've tried to figure out the psychology, and I have just given up. There's a high degree of neuroticism that can accompany folks who are in this situation, and I don't mean to be negative. It's just the reality, and it's good to know that going into this so that you don't waste your time chasing a rabbit hole, which we have done many times. So again, that's number two, why this is my least favorite lead source. My job is to buy houses and make income from the houses that I buy, so my time is very valuable to me. Number three, there is also a degree of delusionality that accompanies some of these seller types. You're talking about folks who think they can save their house like one day before the auction, and so they finally reach out in desperation, and sometimes it's possible, but oftentimes it's not. And in this case, with this particular seller, so I'm sitting in his living room and I get on the phone with his lender. Always a great idea to just try and help the individual, see if they can get a loan modification with the lender. Usually they're not going to be able to once they are being foreclosed on, but it's worth getting on the phone with the lender. So we got on the phone, it was US Bank, and we got a loss mitigation packet sent to the seller's house, and it took several days to fill that out. He sent it in, it got rejected, and so we were trying to help this seller keep his house, which is always the best approach. You always want the best for the seller. If they truly want to keep the house and there's a way to do it, then you should point them in that direction. And that's what we try to do. And when he realized that it wasn't going to be possible to save his house, he turned to us to sell the house to us. Now, as I'm sitting there in his living room, this individual was absolutely amazingly hospitable and pleasant to be around. He ordered us pizza, he got donuts for us, and just kind of wanted to hang out with us. Now, I like making friends, but I also have a family and I'm a very busy person. So I'm sitting there and we're basically trying to determine what kind of cash we could bring to him at closing, because he was behind $24,000 on his mortgage payment, which is quite a hefty sum. So if we're going to bring 24 grand to catch his mortgage payment up and then take over the payments from there, well then, is there any room to give him any cash? Now this leads to the one reason why pre-foreclosures are amazing lead sources. There can be a ton of equity in these properties. Usually subject to deals are low equity situations, but in this case, it was not a low equity situation. Bringing the seller some cash to close was an option on the table since he had a significant amount of equity. The individual was pretty unreasonable with what he expected to get out of the sale of his home, considering the condition of the property and that we would have to buy it as is and close within a matter of several days because the auction date was rapidly approaching. Maybe I should add a fourth reason why I don't like pre-foreclosures, but basically they take up your entire life. If you're going to close on a pre-foreclosure and you have a very tight timeline, this is like a ticking time bomb. You have to get in there and dismantle this bomb as fast as you can. You've got to put down everything to get this deal done. And sometimes the trustee who's in charge of the sale or catching up and reinstating the mortgage, they can be a giant stick in the mud and not want to reinstate the loan, which happened to us. We tried to catch up the mortgage, the $24,000, but they needed it written out by him, not us, and so we had to go to our bank and his bank and see if we could wire the funds to his bank and then from his bank to the trustee. This was such a logistical nightmare that the day before the auction was going to happen, it just really put a bad taste in my mouth for doing these pre-foreclosures. My mentor warned me, Hans, if you're going to take down this deal, be prepared to do nothing but do this deal for the following 7 days. And he was correct. Now, all that kind of gets overshadowed. We got a ton of equity in this deal, regardless of the seller trying to get full market value for a house that, again, we were buying as is. There was a very long horizontal crack in the foundation of the house in the basement. It just ended up being kind of a risky situation to close on the property, not having done any other inspection and having that very large foundation repair that we needed to do. So we needed to negotiate the price down, the cash that we were going to bring them at close, significantly. We were able to do that and get the deal closed. But the reality is a lot of these folks, they are going to wait to the last minute. When you try to speak reason to them, they're not going to hear it. Look at it. They're like in the last days of owning their house before they get foreclosed on, and they think that there's a way out still. I guess I have enough neuroticism in my own brain to really want to delve full-fledgedly into more of that in my business. Now, how we got that equity out of the subject to deal is the topic for another episode. But yeah, those are the 3 reasons why pre-foreclosures are my least favorite lead source. Now, they can be amazingly profitable, but it comes at a cost. So the question is, what cost is worth it to you? If you have any questions about this deal or how we got this lead, how we communicated with the seller, please let me know. And what experiences have you had with pre-foreclosure leads in general? Do you like these leads? Are they easy to work? Are they hard to work? And what kind of profits have you seen doing subject to deals on pre-foreclosures? Leave a comment below, and if you found value in this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode.